Welcome to the AccelerEyes webinar today. Today we'll be talking about productive GPU software, specifically for the acceleration of genomics applications in MATLAB through the Jacket GPU software product. Today we're going to talk about a couple of things, but the first thing I want to do is introduce the motivation for using GPUs and why the usage of GPUs is going to really help your application run faster. And the fundamental reason that people are migrating to using GPUs in large numbers today is because of this chart. And this chart is somewhat old, but it shows the general trend that over the course of the last decade, GPUs have continued to advance at a much faster pace in terms of computational speed than CPUs. And this is due to the fundamental physical limitations of the different architectures. And whereas CPUs cannot continue to increase in clock frequency, GPUs can continue to add more cores and more parallelism to the problem. And so AccelerEyes began around the same time that CUDA was born in 2007. Since then, hundreds of millions of GPU compute devices are available on the market. They're sold as standard components of PCs, of servers, of laptops. There's hundreds of thousands of active GPU developers and many, many applications that now are taking advantage of these GPUs to get anywhere from 2x to 100x improvements in speed. Today we're going to be focusing on genomics applications, and we'll see that genomics applications in particular are very well suited in many cases for acceleration through the use of a GPU. There are two main technologies that people are looking to today as the underlying bread and butter for computing on a GPU. NVIDIA has the CUDA technology. It's the most mature and most extensive today. It is NVIDIA only today, and it is beginning to open up, meaning that there are some initiatives designed to make CUDA code run on other than NVIDIA devices. OpenCL is an open standard, much like OpenGL, the graphics counterpart to the compute OpenCL. It runs on AMD, Intel, NVIDIA, and many, many other manufacturers' devices. AMD is the major supporter today. It runs well but requires some work to run on the various different devices in a performant manner. At AccelerEyes, we have two main products. ArrayFire is a GPU library for C, C++, Fortran, Python, and there are some other extensions. There is a CUDA version, and today we have a beta OpenCL version. Today we're going to be talking about, however, the other product, Jacket, which is all about making MATLAB code run faster. It supports CUDA, and again, there's also a beta version of Jacket that supports OpenCL devices. In addition to our products, we have services. If you're interested in getting some hands-on coding services, you can hire us to do that through consulting. Additionally, if you're interested in training your organization to do better CUDA or OpenCL development, we all provide those expert GPU training courses. I wanted to start this presentation today by sharing some case studies. One of my favorites comes from the Center for Disease Control, and we're looking at a hepatitis C virus, and their goal was to explore random genetic mutations of that virus. They had 10,000 random alignments simulating the distribution of correlation values under the null hypothesis that substitutions of the amino acid at two sites are statistically independent. So essentially what this boiled down to in their code is they have a for loop with 10,000 iterations, where in each iteration they have a random sequence that they're then trying to correlate with the known virus sequence. These 10,000 random alignments were intractable on a CPU. It was something that was going to take months, if not years, to compute. As you can see there, 1,358 hours for one core, a MATLAB only. That was the time it was, if you could actually run the computer that long without some sort of interruption, that's how long it would have taken. If you do some CPU parallelism, then you can get a great improvement. So CPU parallelism is by no means something to ignore. It's a very powerful kind of parallelism, and so you can get some good with 8 CPU cores, some good benefit. However, when you couple the CPU parallelism with GPU parallelism, you get absolutely astounding results. 18 times speed up through the addition of GPUs, as you can see here in this chart. So the CDC went from having to wait from an intractable problem just due to the length of time that it would take to run to something that they could run in less than half a day. Here's another example of the Leibniz Institute. They were exploring dimensionality reduction problems. Many bioinformatics and genomics problems have many dimensions due to the much data that is collected in those kinds of problems. And in many cases, the goal is to understand the data, and you have to do some sort of dimensionality reduction. In this one, you can see in the visualization that the data starts out as these scattered points, and that through the dimensionality reduction, you can achieve something that's more understandable and shows a general trend within the data. The speed up of doing this dimensionality reduction by using GPUs, Leibniz Institute hit 35x performance increase by using GPUs in Jacket over using regular CPU MATLAB code. Another one from a similar domain is real-time signal processing. Spencer Technologies had these 64 sensors that they would put on your head and do some recordings. In this case, they just had all of these signals in real time, and they needed to process them, and they were able to get 12x performance improvement in this real-time technology. They essentially had a workstation on a moving cart with wheels on it, and that workstation had GPUs in it, and so they were able to get that real-time performance on the sensor and actually deploy it into hospital settings. Now that we've been motivated by some of the examples, I want to share the general concepts behind how does it actually work. And the main focus of Jacket is to eliminate the hassle or the complexity of developing code for a GPU in the first place. And the way we accomplish that is by providing a few key functions that generate data or create data on the GPU, either creating data from scratch or transferring data from your own CPU variables out to GPU variables that reside on the GPU. And then everything else is overloaded using the standard MATLAB overloading techniques as described in their documentation. And you don't have to change the rest of your code because MATLAB just processes that naturally as it normally is designed to do. As you can see in this code, the only GPU-specific lines are those lines highlighted. And so we offer the grand function that creates a random matrix, or in this case, a random vector of 20 million random samples of double precision out on the GPU. The rest of the lines then are standard computational lines that have no need of modification to do the GPU computing. The kinds of data that are supported through Jacket are the same kinds of precision types that you would expect out of a computation. So we have double precision, Boolean, integers, and single precision. We likewise through Jacket can support vectors, matrices, volumes, and n-dimensional data structures. You can do the same sorts of computations out on the GPU with the same data types that you would need to do to get your algorithms done today. They're easy to manipulate. Subscripted assignment and subscripted referencing are supported so that you can pull out rows, vectors, columns, intricate subscripting patterns out of your data set. So again, after having your random data out on the GPU, the lines that are highlighted here there is nothing GPU specific about those lines. And in fact, when you run GPU data structures through those lines, you can get about, I believe, 20x speedup on those 3 lines of code merely by the fact that you're using a parallel GPU processor as opposed to the serial CPU processor. Dr. Kevin Tubbs reported that very little recoding was needed to promote his lattice-Boltzmann model to run on the GPU. Again, this is merely because with Jacket, you don't need any GPU-specific stuff. There's no kernels, no threads, no blocks. It's just regular M code that you write to get your job done. One of the biggest features of Jacket today is that there are parallel for loops for the GPU. This is something that can greatly enhance the speed of your code. As you can see in the red, a regular for loop on the CPU launches kernels in a serial fashion. So for instance, if you were to run that kind of for loop on the GPU, it would launch an individual kernel for each iteration of the for loop. However, with Jacket's G4, you simply append the G in front of the for, and you get a loop that is able to combine all iterations and do one kernel launch out on the GPU, meaning that all iterations can, in parallel, do the computation. So to spell that out a little bit more thoroughly, again, a sequential for loop would do iteration 1 first, and then pause, iteration 2, then pause, iteration 3. But with G4, you can tile all the iterations together so that it looks something like this. Again, the only difference in the way you write the code is that you put the G in front of the for, but underneath the hood, the problem is constructed in such a way that you can get all of the data computing simultaneously, and it ends up with the same numeric answer as you would have otherwise, but through a very different computational path. You can think of G4 as syntactic sugar to write vectorized code in an iterative style. So here's a similar example. Instead of matrix multiplication like that previous example, this one is summing over columns. And again, the only difference between these two code segments is the addition of the G in front of the for loop. But both of these equivalently result in the summation of the columns of B out into a vector A. One other very powerful feature of Jacket is the ability to scale to multiple GPUs. In many cases, problem sizes demand more computational resource than is available on a single GPU. And in this case, all you have to do to take advantage of multi-GPU scaling is use the gselect function. And gselect will let you, in your code, toggle between the various GPUs available on the system. And depending on whichever GPU is currently selected, that is the GPU that will receive subsequent commands. A very nice way that this works is in a for loop situation where you can, at the top of the for loop, change the selection of the GPU on each iteration so that the body of the loop on iteration 1 will go to GPU 1, the body of the loop on iteration 2 will go to GPU 2, and so forth until you hit the last GPU, and then it will round robin back to GPU 1 again, and so forth. So you queue up all of the work that needs to get done on the available GPUs in the system, using them all in the most optimal and parallel fashion. to make all of this work, there's a very sophisticated technology stack underneath the hood that I describe in a high level here. It's a full system of optimizations, including three, we like to think of it as three sort of components. You have the core runtime that does memory management, binary handling, GPU multiplexing, and thread management, sort of the brains of the system. There's a just-in-time compile engine that's done for enhancing the speed, where a lot of the lightweight functions are able to be compiled on the fly and adapted to your incoming data and data sizes. And then there are certain functions where you just want expert hand-tuned CUDA code to be applied to your problem. And in those cases, we have many expert GPU programmers within AccelerEyes that have developed thousands of functions that you can take advantage of through Jacket today. Here are some other examples of organizations that have achieved great acceleration on real applications, anywhere from the 20x video processing improvement at Google to a 70x drug delivery improvement at Georgia Tech. And as you can see there, this is used in weather modeling, in power engineering, in defense, as well as the genomics examples that we're talking about today. One of the big questions that are asked from time to time is how does Jacket compare to the parallel computing toolbox, especially now that the parallel computing toolbox has had GPU functionality within it since 2010. Despite the fact that the parallel computing toolbox has had GPU capabilities for such a long time, Jacket continues to just be enormously advantageous over the usage of the parallel computing toolbox. And that comes down to four reasons. Number one, the biggest one, of course, is that Jacket is just simply much faster. Jacket does not use this Java embedding that the parallel computing toolbox is limited to, and therefore does not experience the overheads that are associated with that. Jacket is very mature. It was developed many years prior to the parallel computing toolbox and has got much more GPU functionality than was released in the 2010 timeframe by the MathWorks. It also includes much more functionality, so there are just many more codes that you can actually get to run on the GPU through Jacket. So here are some just simple examples of how much Jacket is faster. As you can see, for just really simple arithmetic, Jacket is over 100 times faster than the parallel computing toolbox. That's no joke. You can go benchmark that yourself. It's just night and day difference. Similarly, for just common functions that you'll want to use all the time, sum, min, max, times, power, transpose, pick your flavor of function, Jacket's just hands down going to give you much better performance. And in many cases, actually, the PCT is slower than you'll find that just regular MATLAB would be for the similar functions. Jacket also has support for a full set of linear algebra, image processing, signal processing, statistics, graphics, supports all CUDA devices. As I mentioned, it has a beta version for Intel and AMD. It supports older versions of MATLAB and, of course, works without the PCT and has that G4 data parallel for loop. In terms of 10 times more functions, we invite you to visit our website where the full list of functions is listed, and I'll show you that in a few moments. But today, pretty much everything you would want to do in MATLAB is supported through Jacket. So we rarely find examples of customers today that are doing something that they need some sort of feature that is not supported today. Jacket is very easy to maintain. Once you use the Jacket data types, G double, G single, when NVIDIA or other vendors release new versions of their devices, you don't have to change your code. So with each Jacket release, you simply upgrade your version of Jacket, and then you can take advantage of the latest technology improvements for the various NVIDIA architectures. So this year, we're seeing the release of a new NVIDIA architecture called Kepler, and people that wrote their code back in 2009 with Jacket don't need to change that code whatsoever to take advantage of the Kepler architecture. They simply will upgrade to the latest Jacket version, and they can get the ability to run on that Kepler architecture. The same is true into the future as well. So any code developed today will last forever, and you don't need to modify or change that code. Once many people using MATLAB actually don't intend to keep their application in MATLAB forever, they often end up manually porting to C, C++, Fortran, or Python, and that's where the ArrayFire GPU library is used so often. It's free for most users. It's free for a single GPU. It's available for CUDA, and again, there's a beta version for OpenCL devices. The general concept is the same, though it's a very different interface, but you can create arrays, which are GPU data types, and then there's a whole library of functions that operate on those arrays that are expressive in a way that's not complicated, that doesn't require extensive knowledge of low-level GPU architecture. And so here's that same Pi example we showed previously. Looks a little different because the interface is different, but the general concept is that you create an array and you do compute in a way that makes sense. So before we get into the benchmarks and demos, if you go to the website, it's very simple to navigate. You can quickly get from the home page over to the documentation about which Jacket functions are supported. Just go to the Support tab at the top of the page, and you'll come to the documentation. So anything you want to know about Jacket is available here in our online wiki, but the supported functions you can click on. And here are all the various supported functions that you can, these are MATLAB functions supported on the GPU through Jacket. And as you can see, pretty much everything you would want to use is available through that. Okay. In addition to the list of functions, there's a great getting started guide that will walk you through an overview, through installation, through the general usage of G4, Gcompile, and also through the usage of some add-on libraries. All of these libraries are included with the base Jacket license, but you can learn about many things here. There are extra resources of programming tips, code vectorization examples, and so forth as well. There's also a blog we invite you to subscribe to where you can get some helpful information about real applications that people are porting to GPUs today. Okay, so now let's take a look at some real examples that exist. I'm going to talk through these examples while they're run on this machine. If you can look at this, this is what we're going to run here is a few genomics examples. I believe three of these examples or so. I'm going to start by running the same one that was run or that was shown in one of the examples previously. So this is going to run the genomics MDF example. This is the multi-dimensional scaling example from the Leibniz Institute we showed previously. I'm going to have that run on the CPU first. So in this case, you can see that it's doing the multi-dimensional scaling at 3 steps per second. So that's sort of as fast as this computer can run. This is a latest Sandy Bridge processor in this machine. Okay, I'm going to just stop that. And then we can run the same example on the GPU. Let me close this window. Same example on the GPU. And here we're seeing instead of 3 frames per second, it's running at 45 steps per second, 46 steps per second or so. So just about a 15x performance improvement for this example. This example is included with every Jacket installation, so we encourage you to check out a trial version of Jacket and to run this example. It's located in the examples directory, and you can see how fast of a speed up you too can achieve in this example. Okay. Now I'm going to run the some other pieces of code that we've developed for genomics applications. In this one, we're going to run the Mantel-Hain test, or it performs Mantel-Hain-Zell test for K strata of this asymptotic test based on the chi-squared distribution. This example 2 will be released in the next version of Jacket, so you can check it out some more. But basically, we're going to run this example through for K equals, let's see, it looks like 10 million. And we'll see what kind of performance improvement we get on this genomics test. Okay, it looks like the CPU took a little over a second. The GPU took 4 or 5 100ths of a second, and the speedup was a 25x performance improvement. As you can imagine, if you're running this test on many, many data sets, this could drop something that was taking 1 month to complete down to 1 day, and so forth. It's a huge, to be 25x faster really can mean a big deal in terms of a real application. Okay. Similarly, there's another test here. This is the log Fisher test. It calculates the natural log p-value of a hypergeometric distribution. The original code on the CPU was developed by Chia Meng, as you see here at MIT. It's going to go through, and after identifying a list of 30 genes from the entire genome of 20,000 genes, 5 genes are related to cycle, while there are totally 200 cell cycle gene in the genome. This is to say 5 genes in the gene list, and related to the cell cycle, 25 genes are in the gene list but not related to cell cycle. 195 genes are not related to cell cycle but not in the gene list. And again, this is an example that you can look at that will be in the next version of Jacket included as an example. To run this log Fisher example, executing now. So here, the CPU took 1.5 seconds. The GPU took about 4 1,000ths of a second, and the speed up is over 400x. This is one of the bigger sides of a speed up that we ever see on GPUs, and it's really due to the fact that this problem is got a lot of parallelism that it's able to extract. As you can imagine, again, this kind of speed up is something that you could take part in if you were to port likewise your code to the GPU. Let's take a look for a minute at this code to understand what's going on here, and then I'll answer some of the questions. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat window, and I'll discuss them in a moment. So in this log Fisher function, this is all setup stuff. It's creating the various parameters that are going to be used. Let's see here. It's got, then it's using timeIt. timeIt is a convenient function for timing the CPU and GPU functionality. So it's calling the same exact function here but just one with the CPU and the other with the GPU data types. And so then the actual code is coming down here to the log Fisher test, and in this case, it's doing basically a lot of arithmetic with logarithms and so forth. And so there's nothing really that complicated in here. It's just a lot of math to accomplish the p-value log Fisher test. And here's a similar log table that it's doing some lookups and so forth. That's really it. It's a pretty simple example, but so many codes that we see in genomics are likewise consisting of a lot of arithmetic and doing tests on various kinds of data structures. And so simply by taking the data at the top and using G-double instead of double, you're able to get these speedups. If I take a moment to look at some of the questions that have come in, one question is, have you done a sequence, let's see here, have you done a sequence similarity search benchmark, for example, the Smith-Waterman? And with Smith-Waterman, yes, we have had many of Jacket users have implemented Smith-Waterman or variations thereof with Jacket. We don't have an example that we distribute with Jacket that does Smith-Waterman, but that is something that is highly parallelizable and easily implemented through Jacket. A second question is, how do you pass a long sequence to the GPU? For instance, when you have 3 billion base pairs in the human genome, how do you pass such a large data structure to the GPU? And the answer to that is, well, it depends upon the constraints of the GPU itself. The largest GPU memory today is around 6 gigabytes on a single GPU. In many domains, the data that people want to send to the GPU exceeds 6 gigabytes, and in those cases, the users simply partition the data and send chunks of data one at a time to the GPU. A nice thing about Jacket is that you can take advantage of Jacket's asynchronous data transfer mechanisms so that, and this is all implicitly, Jacket does it without you needing to do something special. It just is able to transfer data while other pieces of data are doing the compute. And so that's how you can do it. You sort of have to divide it into chunks and send smaller pieces of it to one GPU at a time. The question here is, does Jacket replace the need for the MATLAB distributed computing product? And the answer to that is, well, it depends on what you're trying to do. But if you're trying to use MATLAB in the sense of where the distributed computing server is used, which means multiple nodes, multiple different computers, then Jacket does not replace the distributed computing server. And in fact, Jacket can enhance the distributed computing server so that the distributed computing server is able to run on the GPUs in the various nodes. Looks like there's a follow-up question, which was, if you need to distribute memory across multiple nodes, you can do that through the distributed computing server, and then the distributed computing server handles the CPU division of, or the CPU or the nodal division of data between the nodes, and then Jacket merely will take CPU data from any given node and offload the CPU data in that node to the GPUs that are available within that node. But all of that is done in conjunction or in harmony, interoperating with the MATLAB distributed computing server. Jacket works by overloading standard MATLAB, existing MATLAB functions, whether those MATLAB functions be anywhere within the MATLAB system or MATLAB toolbox system. As you know many of MATLAB data types work in that way of being overloaded through the toolboxes. And so MATLAB automatically enables Jacket to support many, many toolboxes, including signal processing toolbox, image processing toolbox, statistics toolbox, neural network toolbox. You name the toolbox, in most cases, Jacket will support it because MATLAB enables that overloading automatically for Jacket functions. With neural networks in particular, Jacket is able to run with many, many of those functions. In terms of the specific functions, I don't know those off the top of my head, but you could simply pass the Jacket GPU data type into those functions and see if MATLAB will overload them automatically. In most cases, we find that MATLAB does that automatically. Okay. There are some other questions about our OpenCL product, wondering when it's going to move from beta to a full version. And the answer to that is that it's coming very soon. In fact, we expect it to be available in the next 2 months or so. So that's going to be a very exciting new offering where you can run the same Jacket code through OpenCL on OpenCL-capable devices in a big way. Let's see. There's a question about how do Jacket licenses work. Jacket licenses are sold in a variety of ways. You can have designated computer licenses that apply to an individual or single machine, or you can get network licenses that enable any users within a network to access the software on any machine within that network. There is a large discount for academic organizations relative to commercial organizations, but the standard commercial price for a straight-up Jacket license is $9.99, and the commercial price is $3.50 for the same. And then of course there are many other options and add-ons and different network or designated computer license flavors that you can work with. Question: does Jacket support cloud computing with servers that have a GPU? And the answer is yes. As long as you can, all Jacket licenses require MATLAB and the various MATLAB toolboxes that you would want to run with. So if you can install those in the cloud environment, Jacket will likewise work in that same cloud environment. We've seen people use, for instance, Amazon's EC2 cloud with Jacket. We've seen Penguin Computing has a nice cloud. Pier 1 has a nice GPU cloud. And so you can look at those various servers and GPU options. Is the license perpetual? Yes, it is. It's fully perpetual. Comes with 1 year of free maintenance, and subsequent years have a nominal 10% maintenance fee to get the maintenance in those years. Let's see. I should mention that in genomics in particular, it's a lot of the pharmaceutical companies that are using Jacket today are not able to share their code publicly. We're not able to share their code publicly, but there are many, many applications that are serious applications at Roche and Pfizer and some other large companies that are able to get great acceleration through Jacket and GPUs. And this is something that we truly believe that if you spend a little bit of time with, you can get a lot of return value in your personal applications through the usage of Jacket and GPU computing. Our 2012B was recently released from the MathWorks. We have some partners that are doing benchmarking. We typically rely on on some bloggers and other independent third parties to do the benchmarking, so that it can be sort of an unbiased performance results. From initial things that we hear, it's not very much different than R2012A, and in fact, it hasn't really changed much since the early days of. Let's see, MathWorks has now done 5 releases of GPU functionality, and they just really haven't improved very much from one version to the next. I don't believe that R2012B is any different from the initial feedback that we've heard, but we'll post those results as soon as we get them finalized. We appreciate your time, and it's been a wonderful session. We will post the example codes in the next version of Jacket, as well as the one that exists there currently, and you'll be able to find a video of this webinar on our blog in the very near future. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.